Jai Hind to all. This is Akanksha Shukla, Assistant Professor from Information Technology Department from AKGC. Today I am going to discuss one of the most important topic of subject SCI, Human Computer Interface. The topic is basically the direct manipulation, which today I am going to discuss in front of you all. So basically, first of all, I want to tell you about the basic definition, that what is the direct manipulation. So just like in a interface, or when we are using interfaces, so direct manipulation is just like a technique which is basically used to basically used as an interaction style in which user acts as an acts with their physical actions, or it acts on the displayed objects of their interest using the physical incremental or reversible actions whose effects you can see immediately over the screens. So basically, direct manipulation is a technique, or it is an interaction style in which the users, or any kind of users, acts on the displayed objects which are displaying over the screen of their interest with the use of their physical incremental reversible actions, and after performing the particular actions, that the effects of these actions can be seen immediately over the screen. So it is one of the central concepts of GUIs, graphical user interfaces, and also sometimes it is similar, or it is equivalent to the word, just like here it is written at what you see is what you get. So similarly, just like in what you see is what you get, direct manipulation is also a technique in which you applied, or you with the use of the physical actions, or with the use of the reversible or incremental actions, you can manipulate the things directly which you are seeing over the screen, and the effects can be immediately seen or observed over the screen only. The interfaces, these interfaces, when combined with the menu based interaction with these physical actions, just like dragging and dropping, in order to help the users in performing the interfaces, that kind of learning involves that kind of technique involves the minimum learning. Here the user does not need to learn more the things. Only what he or she has to do, he or she has to depend over only on the physical action, just like he has to drag and drop the icons or elements from one place of the screen to the another. So directly with the use of these physical actions, they can manipulate the things over the screens which are properly, or which are easily visible over the screens. Now the concept behind the direct manipulation is, it is just like the system which is portrayed just like the extension of the real words. So in direct manipulation, it is assumed that the person is already familiar with these objects or with these actions, whatever the actions or whatever the things are running over the environment, his or her environment of interest. So these things or these environments are already known to that person. So the direct manipulation concept is basically that the system simply replicates them and portrays them on a different medium, which is the screen here only. So if a person has the power to access or modify these objects, among which are the windows only, these are the windows over which the user can access or modify these objects which are visible over the screens, or which visible over the windows. So here the person is allowed to work in this familiar environment and in a very much familiar way, focusing only on the data, not on the applications or the tool palettes here only. So the basically what is the physical organization of the system, which is most often is unfamiliar. Generally what happens, that the physical organization of the system is not known to the users, or it is in the hidden form. Okay, so basically this concept is helpful in those concepts only, okay, where the physical organization of the system is unfamiliar or hidden from the view. So with the use of this technique, one can easily perform the physical actions and can view the objects and can manipulate it as per his or her requirement only. The continuous visibility of the objects and actions, here we can see, just like desktop objects, reminders of actions to be performed, label buttons replacing the complexity or replacing the complex syntax or commands names. So these are the basic concept behind the direct manipulation techniques, just like when it is useful, or when the continuous visibility of the objects or actions can be seen here. Okay, so these are the some examples where we can apply the direct manipulation techniques. Now this what is the earlier concept behind the direct manipulation was? Earlier it was forwarded behind the concept of graphical systems. So the concept of direct manipulation is actually preceded the first graphical system. Okay, so what we have observed that the earliest full screen text editors possess the similar characteristics just like the direct manipulations. What was the concept in earlier was that the screens of text resembling the piece of work, suppose piece of paper on one desk, and it should be created and then reviewed in their entirely continuous visibility only. Now what happens that editing or restructuring could be easily accomplished through the rapid incremental actions, and the results were immediately be seen over the screens only. Now actions are also can be reversed when necessary. Whenever there was a requirement, then these actions could also be reversed. Just like first, so suppose I did something wrong over the screen. So what alternative to that was that the option undo was also given here. So that actions can also be reversed whenever there is a requirement or whenever there is a necessity of that things only. So it took the advent of graphical systems to crystallize the direct manipulation concept. However, basically the direct manipulation concept is used to crystallize these things, the advents of these graphical systems here. So that's why the direct manipulation concept or the direct manipulation technique is totally based on the physical actions or reversible or incremental actions of the user only. Now what are the basic characteristics of the direct manipulation? The direct in this analysis of the direct manipulation, in his analysis of direct manipulations, actually the Sinderman we had already known about the Sinderman principles in human computer interface. So one of the person Sinderman has identified just like the several attributes of this kind of interaction style which make it superior in comparison to the command line interfaces. So what these characteristics are which Sinderman has identified it and which makes it different or which makes it superior in comparative to command line interfaces are: first is continuous representations of the objects of interest. Whatever the objects of interest are, they are continuously represented over the screen. Second one is, instead of writing the complex syntax or instead of reminding the complex systems, here only what is required, here only the requirement of physical actions is required here only, instead of that complex syntaxes or instead of reminding these kinds of complex syntax in your memories. Next one is continuous feedback and reversible incremental actions are required here. And the last one is rapid learning. Here nothing more than no complex syntax has to be required to learn. Here whatever you are doing, if you are doing it first time, then you can learn again and again and you can rapidly learn the things here only, because there is no syntax required, there is no complex syntax is required to learn. So the learning here with the use of direct manipulation, the learning is rapid only. Now here, apart from these characteristics or apart from these advantages, here some disadvantages of direct manipulation is also discussed. First disadvantage is direct manipulation is slow. Now how the direct manipulation technology is slow? If suppose in some cases, or if the user wants to perform a large number of actions on many objects, suppose there are too many objects over the screen, and if the user wants to perform the large number of actions on these objects with the use of direct manipulation techniques. So if the user is using the direct manipulation techniques to perform the large number of actions over the many objects, then the time taking process is too much long in comparison to the command line interfaces. So with the use of direct manipulation techniques, it takes a lot longer time than a command line techniques. If you have just like here it is written that, have you encountered any software engineers who use direct manipulation to write their code? Sure, they might use. They use the direct manipulation elements in their software development interfaces, but the majority of the code will be typed in. Okay, so what is observed here, that whenever there is a requirement, or whenever there is a requirement of some actions to be performed over the object, then we can use the direct manipulation. But when there is a requirement of large number of actions, when there is a encounterment of large number of codes, then majority of the codes will be typed in, then we recommend not to use the direct manipulation techniques, because the time process or the time taking or the time slot for the direct manipulation for the large number of actions will be too much. Next one is repetitive tasks are not well supported. With the use of direct manipulation interfaces, these are great for novices because they are easy to learn. There are basically, the word here is used novice. So there are three kinds of users. First one is novice, then intermittent, and the third one is expert user. So the novice users are the new users, or they are not well familiar with the systems, or they are not too much experienced. So direct manipulation techniques or direct manipulation interfaces are great for that kind of users, for the new kind of users who are not very much experienced or who are not very much familiar with these things. So this technique is great for supporting these kind of users, because in this technique there is no complex syntax to learn. There are not too much syntax to be remind in your mind. So this technique is easy to learn. So that's why it is great for novice users. But because they are slow, so for experts who have to perform the same set of tasks with the high frequency, usually rely on the keyboard shortcuts, macros, and other command language interactions to speed up the process. So for novice user, this is good. But if there is a requirement, or if this technique is used by experts, then they recommend less for this technique, because they have to perform the same set of tasks with the higher frequency in comparison to the novice users. So that's why the repetitive tasks are not well supported in terms of direct manipulation technique. Now the third disadvantage is some gestures can be more error prone than typing. Some just like if you are typing, or if you are coding in by with the use of typed language, or with the in typing, if you are writing a code, then it is better if in comparison that sometimes, not always, but in some cases the gestures can be more error prone than typing, in some cases, not in all. So just like in just like in theory, because of the continuous feedback, direct manipulation minimizes the chance of that kinds of error in practical. But there are in spite of that, there are some conditions or some situations when gestures or when these kind of things is harder to perform in comparison to typing equivalent information. So sometimes, not always, sometimes this kind of identification or the gestures are hardly to perform in comparison to typing that kind of equivalent information. Just like, suppose if you are going to type the font kind. So if you want to write, or if you want to write equivalent to that Arial Times New Roman, these are the some font styles. So comparatively, these styles, if you are using some icons or graphics, then for similar purpose, it is difficult to identify the icons or images with respective that font styles. So what we generally use the textual information for displaying this kinds of font styles. We are not using any graphics or icons, because the graphics or icons for this font style thing is difficult to implement. So that's why we are using only the textual information, just like Arial, Times New Roman, or more font styles. So we are not using any graphics or icons for similar kind of purpose. So same here, there are some situations where when we are observing that the gestures is harder to perform, or some physical actions is harder to perform, comparatively we are opting in typing that equivalent information easy way. Next one is accessibility may suffer. Direct manipulation user interfaces may fail in visually impaired users or users with motor skill impairments, especially if they are heavily based on the physical actions as opposed to button presses and menu selections. So sometimes what happens that with the use of direct manipulation, in spite of using direct manipulation, the accessing of that kind of objects will fail only, because sometimes what happens that the things or the the users interfaces which are mostly visually impaired or which are having the motor skill impairments, they are heavily based on the physical actions. So comparatively with the users of button presses or menu selections, they preferred that particular physical actions. But sometimes what happens that the work, due to the workaround adjustments or but it can be difficult to implement them. So due to these kinds of problems, the accessibility sometimes suffer in direct manipulation techniques due to the heavily dependent over the physical actions only. Basically what happens then, whenever some users are heavily dependent over the physical actions, and sometimes what happens that the accessibility, whatever the proper accessibility they want to that particular object, can be failed in some cases. Now here example is given with the if you are with the use of direct manipulation. If you are driving the car by manipulating the steering wheels and pedals, then car responded immediately to your actions what you are performing here, and these responses are immediately you can evident or you can see. But if you are making a mistake, just like you are turning too sharply, or you can quickly recognize this and performing the corrective measures only with an intermediary style of interaction. This is example when we are using the direct manipulation technique, that you are driving the car by manipulating the steering wheels and pedals. So whenever you are manipulating or when you are performing these kind of actions, the car responded immediately as per your actions, and these responses are immediately evident or you can see only. But if you are making a mistake, such as just like turning too sharply, if you are also making these kind of mistakes, then in spite of that mistakes only, you can also quickly recognize this and you can perform the corrective measures. Means if you are using or if you are opting the direct manipulation technique, then if you are doing any mistake also, then it can be quickly recognized by yourself and you can perform a preventions related to that, or you can perform a corrective measures in correcting that mistakes only. But if in comparison to these in reverse order, if you are using an intermediary style of interaction and you are sitting in the back seat of the car giving a stranger direction. Suppose a stranger is driving a car and you are sitting at the back side of the car and you are only giving the direction to that stranger who is driving the car, and further you are imagining the stranger possessing poor interpersonal skills and having a limited vocabulary. Means whatever the directions you are giving to that car driver, suppose after some time you are going to recognize or you are going to identify that he is having a limited vocabulary and you have lost the feel for the road. Suppose you are sitting at the back side and you are giving the directions to the stranger, and at a time you have lost the feel for the road and you do not have a direct view of where are you going, then worst yet you have to rely on the stranger only. What you have to do? You have to rely on the stranger only, and if they do not receive the explicit directions using the particular phrases in a fixed order, then ideals in the middle of the road or it takes you to the unfamiliar place from which you do not know the way out. Means when you are using the direct manipulation technique, you are driving the car by manipulating the steering wheels and pedals, and with these actions the car is responding immediately, and you can also evident these kind of responses which you are getting from the car. And in spite of that, if you are making any mistakes also, then also you can quickly recognize that mistakes and you have a corrective measures to perform you will perform a corrective measures in overcoming that kind of mistakes only. But if you are not using this direct manipulation technique and you are only sitting at the back bench of the car and you are giving the directions to the stranger, and further you are imagining that the stranger is having the limited vocabulary and also you have lost the feel for the road and you are not having a direct view of the road at that time, then what is the worst you have to face? That this, first of all, you have to rely only on the stranger because you have lost the feel for the road, and second one is he is not receiving any explicit directions using the particular phrases because he has a limited vocabulary. So what he will carry or what he will further follow the path, he will take you to the unfamiliar place, and from where, suppose in some cases or you have to face that you do not know how to come out from that kind of situation or from how to come out from that place also. So this is one of the basic advantage why we are using the direct manipulation technique, that here directly you can evidence the responses with the whatever the physical actions you are performing. You will continuously get the responses in respect of these actions, and you can easily recognize the mistakes also, and you can also perform the corrective measures for that mistakes also. So this is one of the basic advantage of the direct manipulation technique. Now in summary, I want to discuss that it's hard to imagine modern interfaces without the direct manipulation. Almost most of the interfaces are aimed to the broad audiences and has a graphical component which are based on the direct manipulation, and with the explosion of with the evaluations of the touch screen devices, we have seen that direct manipulation user interfaces depart from the original office metaphors, and it is innovate in the variety of the domains currently. Despite the many downsides or despite some of the disadvantages also, we still recommend a heavy dose of direct manipulation for most of the user interfaces. It also enhances the user sense of empowerment over the computer by letting them feel that they are in control and are the ones making things happen. Means it realizes the users that they are the only who make the things happen, and all the controls are in under himself or herself. So the upsides of the direct manipulation usually enhances the usability more than the downsides degrades. Any interaction style has its minuses and can be ruined by lack of attentions. There is no magic bullet for the user experience also, but there are definitely design ideas that can advances a usability if employed correctly. So the direct manipulation has proven to be one of these good ideas for more than 30 years. That's why most of the user interfaces, or in most of the interfaces, we are recommending the direct manipulation techniques. Now I will discuss some of the key points of user interface design also. Basically, it is a design of the interface, or it is a design of the system which is directly accessible by the user, and they can directly interact within order to do a task. It basically it establishes the path or the way with which the user can interact with the objects or with the products only. The main aim of the user interface design is to enhance the appearances of the product, the quality of the technology which is used, and the usability of the product. Basically, in human computer interfaces, we are focusing on the universal usability of the products, or universal usability or universal acceptabilities of the objects or the things. So it refers to the softwares or the hardwares of the system which the user can see, and also the various ways or the commands to control or to use that product. It focuses on the looks, or how the apps or how the software is looking, attributes, themes, attributes just like themes, animations, colors. These are constituting, or these things are contributing in the user interfaces only. Some of the principles of the UIDs are useful feedback, minimizing actions, user satisfaction, flexibility, simplicity, clarity, consistency. These are some principles while designing the user interface. You have to follow these principles for designing the user interface designing. So first of all, first one is minimize the actions. Minimize actions means the minimizing the steps per screen. The tasks and the actions which are streamlined. So the task and the actions should be streamlined so that they can be done in as few steps as possible, and these can enhance the usability of the objects over the screens. And the interfaces should be designed while keeping in mind to maintain the steps as few as possible for performing any task. To perform any task, the interfaces or the actions or the task should be streamlined. It should not be too large or should not be too much, so that it creates the boredom inside the mindset of the person. Or after some steps, suppose you are going to on there is a machine and you have to on that machine. To switch on that machine, you have to follow multiple steps. So after one or two steps you get bored, or it may be possible that you quit from that state and you keep idle. Okay, so the actions or the tasks or the interfaces should be designed in such a manner, or should be designed keeping in mind that to have some few steps as possible to perform any task. The second one is simplicity. The user interface should not be so much complex. It should always be designed in a simple and elegant manner so that the novice users can also understand what is there and what is the purpose of this system, whatever the interfaces, what the purpose of this particular kind of system is. So it should be simple and elegant. Consistent means the user interface should be consistent, means the design should be consistent. Increasing consistency increases the familiarity and hence increases the usability. Suppose in a system there are 2 to 3 subsystems, or if there is a window, or you can imagine anything. So consistency should be maintained in just like in the manner that suppose you are using cross button, suppose this symbol you are using to close that particular window or that particular subsystem of the system. So same symbol should be used for whenever you are closing any window, any subsystem or any system, then same symbol should be used, so that it does not create the confusion inside the mindset of the users, that suppose you are using some places you are using this symbol, some places you are using this symbol. So it may distract or it may create the confusion or something else inside the mindset of the person. So consistency should be maintained, because when you are increasing the consistency in the user interface designing, that it increases the familiarity. Suppose the person is familiar with this symbol, so whenever this symbol appears, the purpose of this symbol will be clear to him or her only. Okay, so that's why this principle should be followed while designing the user interface designing. Next one is proving useful feedback. So the user should be provided the feedback for every action. Suppose you have opened the system, so you are giving an acknowledgement that now you are able to use the system, or you can do whatever you want over the system. So at each and every action, the user should be given a proper feedback. Okay, this keeps the user informed and it helps the users to know whether the some action was successful or not. Suppose you have logged in successfully, then a message or acknowledgement should be appeared over the screen that you have logged in successfully. So these kind of feedbacks help the users these informations help the users in keeping their mind that whether he is performing the actions, some action, whether he had performed that action successfully or not. The next one is clarity. So the content should provide the user proper clarity. There should not be ambiguity or there should not be any confusions. Okay, as if there will be if there exists some confusions or some disturbance, then it becomes an obstacle for the user in interacting with that product. So there should be proper clarity, or the things whatever you are writing, or whether you are displaying any message, whether you are displaying any text, these things should be represented or should be presented with proper clarity, with the use of simple and clear words. Not so much complex words should be used here, because if for example, if a novice user is using that interface design or that system is used by the novice user, then it may be possible that that technical word should not be known to him or her. So it becomes obstacle or it becomes problems for that particular user, that he is not aware with this word. So whatever the content you are providing, it should be very much clear and it should be not complex. Now, user familiarity. Instead of using the computer terminologies, or instead of using too much complex or too much technical words, make use of the user oriented terminologies. For example, here the example is given that in Microsoft Office software, the terms such as document, spreadsheet, letter, folders are used, and use of the terms directly, files and identities are avoided, because these words are sometimes in terms of computer terminologies which the persons are not with these words the persons are not too much familiar. So that's why in the Microsoft Office, the software, the terms such as document, spreadsheet, letter, folders are used, because these terms are too much familiar in comparatively to directory, file or identities. Okay, so that's why these terms are avoided and these terms are preferred in Microsoft Office, these words. Now minimal surprises. The command should operate in a known way. This makes the users to easily predict the interfaces. Just like in example, in the word processing document under the tool menu, there should be a facility of spelling and grammar checking. Okay, so these options can help the users in checking the grammars or the spellings of the documentation. So the command should be operated in a known way. The command should be operated in a easy or simple manner. So by using these commands, the user can easily predict the interfaces with the use of these commands. So these tools or these commands or these helping features can help the user in more familiar or in more easy manner, and they can be facilitated by these kinds of commands or these kinds of buttons. Next one is recoverability. The system should provide a recovering facility to the users also. Suppose just like for example, a user has had committed a mistake. Now what to do? He had committed a mistake, so there should be an option to correct those errors also. So there should be a recovering facility for just like you had also seen, or you all are familiar with the undo option. Okay, so what is the main purpose of undo? If unknowingly or if by mistake a user commits a mistake, then undo can correct those errors, or while deleting something or whenever you are permanently deleting any files or folders from the system, it gives you a message. Okay, it requires some confirmation actions from you, that whether you are confirming that whether you are permanently going to delete that file or not, so that the user can think again while deleting something. So these kinds of things are basically provided for this purpose only, for the purpose of recoverability. Okay, so that the system should provide these kinds of options so that the person or the user can recover from unknowingly making mistakes, or can also think again if he or she has to delete something confirmly or not. Next one is user guidance. The user interface can be effectively used by novice users if some user guidance such as help systems, online commands and are supplied. Means if suppose a system is going to be first time used by any user. Suppose this user is a novice user, he is not familiar, he is not so much familiar with these kinds of technologies, with these kinds of terminology. So the user guidance, which I think the help option or help system is I think almost available in all the systems, in all the apps and in all the APIs. So it helps the novice user. Basically this kind of option helps the novice users only, that what to do next or what to perform. So these kinds of things can be helpful for the novice users only. So that's all for this lecture. Thank you all.